All right, welcome, and thank you all for joining. We are excited to work with our partners in AWS and Turbot today. We have lots of good content, so let's dispense with introductions. My name is Michael Reiner. I'm the president of RCH Solutions. My background in life sciences includes experience in manufacturing, regulatory, clinical areas, and where I've spent most of my career and most of RCH in the early discovery and development areas. David, how about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm David Boki. I'm CTO and I lead the services organization for Turbot. I've also been in IT for over 25 years and have a great deal of experience leading highly regulatory companies through cloud transformation efforts, both within those companies and with Turbot, helping them along the way.
And I'm Andrew Bostrom. Sorry about that. I'm Andrew Bostrom, a partner solutions architect here at AWS, focused on healthcare and life sciences, really helping those organizations navigate the cloud journey, compliance, architecting for security, and so on, and a background in healthcare IT. So pleasure talking with you.
All right. So if we take a look at this first slide, as you'll see, this is a much different landscape than we had several years ago. If we look at the big trends in our industry, they're all forcing us to reevaluate the way we look at our current systems, our standards, and even our workflows. These things are all disruptive, but they're exciting as well, especially if we look at them as opportunities. They are all agents of change, for lack of a better term, that can truly transform our business and make a real impact. So starting in the upper left, we have medical innovations, targeted drug solutions, gene-based therapies, and other patient-centered approaches. Moving over to the right, other than people, data is the most important asset to our company, right? We have lots and lots of data. It's coming from many sources. However, so much more so, the leadership of our companies now includes things like the chief data officer, and that's important. These transformative technologies are opening up new doors. So what transformative technologies are we talking about? We're talking about artificial intelligence, GPU computing, and our primary topic of the day that we're going to talk about here, which is the cloud. Well, not only are new businesses emerging because of what I just mentioned, but the services needs are changing as well. All of these things together and individually are threatening a traditional pharma culture. However, we can see them as opportunities to innovate, opportunities to get better results much faster and much more accurately than ever before to advance life sciences. So today, what are we going to talk about? We're going to cover trends, we're going to cover possible solutions, we're going to cover customer successes, and finally, we'll leave you with some takeaways that you might apply to your work. More specifically, Andrew is going to talk about the depth and breadth of AWS and life sciences. Bob will discuss Turbot, the cloud configurations and controls it enables. And finally, I'll talk about transforming efficiencies from one environment to the other. And finally, we'll leave you with some takeaways for accelerating research.
Thanks, Michael.
Andrew, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to give a brief background of where AWS is today and how that can help the life sciences industry. So AWS is proven and established across millions of customers in pretty much every industry and geography. That ranges from startups to enterprises, everything in between. And they're really running every imaginable workload on AWS. And then life sciences, advanced technology has really become the norm in pursuit of data-driven decision-making, acceleration of precision medicine, and other things that require that high-tech edge. So it's really time to merge these benefits and allow both organizations to grow. So we have some key trends that we've seen. The first being a real explosion of data. The amount of data generated, analyzed, and collected is growing astronomically. When it scales by an order of magnitude in approximately 10 years, organizations really have to change the way they analyze and visualize data in a cost-efficient manner. Second, pharmaceutical companies are really facing increased pressure to get to market quickly. The boost to market share associated with being first to market helps recoup that ever-increasing drug discovery and development cost. So traditional IT models and internal systems can lack some agility to support that pace. We see organizations needing agile infrastructures and being able to leverage ever-improving technologies. And with those new technologies and new therapeutics coming out, potentially biopharmaceuticals aimed at more specific conditions, gathering the evidence to support that efficacy and really get reimbursement for those technologies is a growing challenge. So capturing in-market, real-world data requires new approaches, and the explosion of data available via IoT sensors, natural language processing, and so on means that these approaches must be scalable to meet big data demands. Last up is the fact that we're seeing research and development happen across the globe, just collaboration between numerous countries, numerous stakeholders. And that distributed research means that data sources and data ingestion face some challenges, security being one of them. So being able to leverage a network of worldwide data centers that provides redundant power and secure connectivity is really one critical answer to that. So some of the AWS benefits that we see are four key areas. The first being that we can help you decrease the time to get real business value from your research data. And we also provide pay-as-you-go pricing. So instead of expensive over-provisioning and then having your infrastructure sit idle, the cloud allows you to create a high-performance cluster for the 1 hour a month that you actually need it. There's also room in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We're seeing a lot with drug discovery and manufacturing where organizations will predict success rates based on biological functions, model absorption, and safety scenarios. And also in clinical trial research where organizations are able to more easily identify candidates based on potentially unstructured text in their medical record or genetic information. And AWS capacity is also increasing at an unparalleled rate. So we're adding the compute capacity of a Fortune 500 company pretty much every day. So that increase in capacity drives increasing automation around processes and practices so that companies that rely on AWS don't go down as often. The companies can also spin up resources really as they need them, deploying hundreds or even thousands of servers in minutes. Sometimes that scale reaches up to tens of thousands or even millions of virtual servers or containers that are brought online just as they're needed and then taken back offline once the task is done. AWS is also custom-built infrastructure for the cloud, so all elements are designed to intercommunicate well and present the smallest attack surface possible. In addition to the software design, the physical security controls that we have in our data center are designed to be the most stringent in the world. So that has led AWS to be fully trusted by governments, military organizations, global banks, healthcare institutions, and other high-sensitivity regulated industries. So finally, our security team is monitoring the infrastructure all day, every day, and is connected with all the major security watchdog groups and vendors to ensure that potential threats are identified immediately. They're also doing that at a massive scale, which is something that really sets AWS apart. So we can look across 1 million active customer accounts running every conceivable workload, and we can see issues that may only occur once in a billion operations. And when we do remedy those issues, it's for the entire platform. So that level of scale and response simply isn't achievable on your own. Some of the specific compliance and security controls on AWS include protections for life sciences organizations that are looking at the sort of pharmaceuticals, biotherapeutics, med device, and med application space. So AWS allows IT teams to set up that fine-grained access control, auditability, and automated guardrails necessary to create these environments and create regulated workloads following GXP. So the consistent and controllable infrastructure means that you can create templates that allow you to use your infrastructure throughout your organization with a high degree of consistency. This is something like infrastructure as code, where you know what template you're running. AWS also gives you deep control over who can affect elements of your infrastructure and when, where, and how they do it. You're also able to repeatedly test your environment. When you build and validate your applications on AWS, you're using infrastructure software products instead of physical hardware. So that means you can repeatedly test and monitor your environment for compliance rather than manually doing point-in-time activities where you might be doing similar to what you might be doing on-premises today. AWS also allows for highly repeatable testing, so you can test infrastructure via API and do that much more frequently than you would ever be able to do when you manage your own infrastructure. Along with that is automated traceability. So when you're deploying AWS's software infrastructure, you also use tools to automatically log a wide range of activities in your environment, including things like how your infrastructure is deployed and how the information is accessed and configured. That gives you increased traceability, making it easier to support audit requests. So specific tools like CloudTrail allow you to have a high degree of traceability. You can see really who interacted with your environment, when, and what they did. Lastly, AWS has excellent data privacy and encryption tools. So AWS does not use or access customer content for any purpose other than as legally required for maintaining AWS services or providing them to customers. And AWS customers also have the ability to encrypt their data in transit and at rest with fine-grained access controls and really instant access to those audit trails for forensic analysis. We also have a concept called the shared responsibility model, where AWS delivers the security of the cloud and expert guidelines and resources to really help customers with their compliant application development. But then the customer is responsible for the security of the cloud, meaning they develop, validate, and secure their applications based on due diligence and expert consultation. However, we also have many resources available to support customers, including GXP white paper, HITRUST certification, HITRUST white paper and reference architecture, and some other tools like that. And then for those that also want another helping hand, there's tons of partner solutions out there, like Turbot. So David's going to talk a little bit about that.
Great. Thank you so much. And one of the things I wanted to point out, great intro, and I love nerding out a little bit about all of the capabilities that Amazon brings to life sciences in this space. It's incredible feature set that is available to you. And so we're just talking about, there is the security of the cloud that Amazon handles for you. They do a tremendous job of automating the software development lifecycle, the code that they deploy, and they have great tooling in place to monitor what's going on within that environment. There's a similar set of capabilities that, as a customer of AWS, the security in the cloud that is your responsibility. And so Turbot is a software tool that helps you through all of those best practices of configuring the Amazon capabilities that exist out there to provide security for your environment, as well as accelerate your journey in this space. As you see on the slide that's in front of you, we're an advanced technology partner with Amazon. We've been working in this space as partners with Amazon for 5 years, and one of the only software companies that have both the security competency and the life sciences competency to talk about that. So let's go forward. The Turbot's trusted because of this experience that we've had. Turbot is trusted by a large number of life sciences organizations, both in the pharmaceutical space and life sciences space. These are some of our public use cases that have done presentations at reInvent or at other shows for us. And the reasons that they work with us are for a number of different use cases. First one is to accelerate cloud adoption. So if you're moving into the cloud, this is new. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to make sure that you're aligning to all the best practices that Amazon publishes and other organizations public around the security, the compliance, the control of your environment. Turbot helps you do this. So we can accelerate cloud adoption by giving you out of the box a set of automations of guardrails that you can apply within your environment. And that really, drives that strategy forward, makes you be able to, start on second base instead of being up at the plate. Big way that we do this, one of the key mechanisms that we do this, and I'll talk about this in more detail, is helping isolate workloads and automate across those isolated workloads within your environments. Ensuring compliance and security, especially for regulated industries. We talked, earlier about how this is used by governments, by the financial sector, and of course by the life sciences sector, right? And so we have unique both regulatory requirements and internal requirements by companies operating in this space that have special needs in the design and implementation of their cloud strategy to ensure that they're getting the most out of it. Finally, the other thing that we find with life sciences companies is that life sciences companies like to merge and join frequently with each other. So a lot of mergers and acquisitions, but also a lot of joint ventures where industry is working together with higher education, for example, to do research projects where data needs to come together for a short period of time and have joint ownership. And the rules by which you manage that joint ownership are important. The ability to specify in advance and have software tooling check and say, hey, look, all parties' data is being protected in the same way by the same agreed to rules across all those parties. So those are some of the workloads that, or some of the use cases where Turbot shines in the life sciences industry in conjunction with our partners like RCH. The cloud presents unique governance challenges to life sciences organizations because of three things. First one is agility. So the business, whether that's a data scientist or whether that's an application team that want to move an application to the cloud or bring some data to the cloud to do some analysis on, they're moving to the cloud. They're moving to AWS and these capabilities because of the agility that environment brings. That's key. The business has a need. The cloud is providing a capability on demand that helps them, achieve that goal. At the same time, expectations in terms of your ability as an organization, either an IT organization or enterprise organization, to protect your data there, to make sure that you're holding up to your end of the bargain in terms of security in the cloud, is very real. And when you make mistakes like that can mean a headline when in the past it hasn't, right? So those expectations around what you should be doing, what you can be doing, all the new capabilities that have been presented in terms of the capabilities that you have to protect your environment and making sure you configure those correctly. Those are all things that are important for you to know and understand and affect all the time. And then finally, the control aspect, right? So in the past, we've had processes in place, large enterprise organizations to deploy infrastructure because of the way funding was, occurred, capital funding occurred, and because of the actual physical security of the data center, it wasn't possible to do things somewhat out of process. Today with cloud, infrastructure is defined by code, right? We're defining our networking, we're defining our software application stack, we're defining our infrastructure stack as code and deploying that. And that is the best practice. And when you are able to do that, when you're able to leverage these technologies, that puts a huge burden on your ability to be able to govern them and look at the architecture of them, et cetera. How do you do an architecture review of an environment where that is dynamically provisioned? So these three things really come together and create a unique challenge, especially for life sciences that is used to having very rigid processes for review and architectural approval, et cetera, in this space. And that's really where, where Turbot shines, its focus. So what I'm going to do in the next section is really talk about a couple of those use cases, how we see typical organizations moving into the cloud and going through their cloud adoption, and what are some of the pitfalls that they make, and then talk about a slightly different approach that we think will accelerate what you're doing. So in this first model, this is the organization has a need to use the cloud, and they haven't decided really on a control, on a governance model for their deployments yet. So they're in a way stuck in this bottom left-hand corner, stuck in viability, where they're trying to decide how we should approach this. How much freedom should we give to development teams and to data scientists versus how much control should we have? One approach that we see is that, for organizations that are very risk adverse, is that they go into a model where they create a lot of control and they move a lot of their current processes from on-premise out to the cloud. They take a lot of the same queuing, a lot of the same central organization ideas, and a lot of the control ideas, and they move that. And what we see is that they start to have some success in the cloud, but they're constrained by the agility is really constrained by those processes. If you always have to ticket into someone to create a VPC, and building VPC as code is somewhat constraining. I have a customer that we work with that's working on an IoT application in the life sciences space where they're collecting a huge amount of data. And that application is actually creating and destroying VPCs on an hour by hour basis in order to meet the demands of the different IoT devices that are out there in the space. So when you have this model, what tends to occur is that you have a few early adopters that are frustrated by the lack of agility, and they start doing their own thing. So you start to see a few applications pop up in this Wild West zone where they've gone off the reservation, they've ignored kind of the IT governance model for this, they just swipe their own credit card, they start doing their own thing. Eventually what will occur here is that because they're not IT experts, because they don't know how to effectively do the security in the cloud piece that we were talking about earlier, they will do something wrong, and that will create risk for the organization, and the organization will even move farther down into the control scheme and reduce the ability to go even further, which is the next build. We can actually go 2 forward here, and then the other model that we oftentimes see is early on. Life sciences is a huge early adopter of cloud computing because of the size of the data that we have, because of the workloads, because of the intelligence of the data scientists and the application teams working in the life sciences space. Many of those teams were early adopters in the cloud, and they didn't have insight or ideas from central IT within their organization in terms of which way they should go. So they started building things and just kind of built them. They would read best practice white papers. They do their best, but they essentially had a huge amount of self-service and self-service control, and they started working on that. Once that got big enough, either the spend gets big enough or the visibility of those applications get big enough, then the central IT organization comes in and starts to pull away some of the capabilities that they have, right? And it doesn't matter if it's even, if the organization's risk profile has been reduced. To those application teams, it doesn't feel good because they had something and now that something was taken away. The reality is that those things that were taken away might be better managed now. But the feeling, what is left with those teams is that they had this really high degree of control, and now they've lost all that, right? So what we want to do is really avoid both of those situations. And we think that between a combination of the software that Turbot provides and the services that RCH provides, we can move you quickly along this sweet spot where you have a really high degree of agility and self-service on the application teams, on the data sciences teams, but your enterprise organizations feel they're 100% in control. They know exactly what's going on in the environment, and they can control, they can monitor, and they can affect what can be done and what can be done within there. With that model, we feel like you have the best of both worlds and you move quickly, and this is what accelerates your movement to the cloud. A huge portion of that ability to move quickly is tied to how you manage accounts within AWS. So there's a lot of different models for managing accounts. Most organizations, when they're getting started, they have 1 or 2 POCs that are going on. So someone will work with AWS, they'll get an account set up, they may connect that to networking, but it's essentially a single tenant, self-built AWS account that they're deploying their applications into. Then another project will come along and ask, hey, look, we've got something that we'd like to do as well. Can we share, that house with you? And in the beginning, everything's hunky-dory, everyone's getting along. You've got maybe 1, 2, 3 different applications all running in the same account. But over time, as more and more workloads come on board, then the house starts to look a little messy. That shared environment, that shared house went from kind of very neat. Maybe the original person that designed kind of the governance within that shared moves on. And so then it's left to the team to do that. And so things get a little messy. Someone steps on each other's toes. Something stops working. And so then IT comes in and says, hey, I know what we need to do. We really need to create some services around this. And so they start building a service model. They're saying, hey, look, so rather than you guys doing these things yourself, why don't we put process in place in order to provide that as a service to you? And this is what commonly happens on-prem. And what we see is organizations that get into this space and start doing this model tend to start replicating their on-premise capabilities into the cloud. We at Turbot feel like there's a better model for this approach. And that's really the multi-tenant model. Building out core infrastructure so that everyone is lifted, so that those application teams, the data scientists, don't have to know how to build networks. They don't know how to, don't have to know how to turn on CloudTrail to do all the best practices that are necessary for the security and compliance of their individual account. They have all the core services necessary to them, but they each get their own space to play. They don't have to worry about tripping over anybody else. They don't have to worry if I'm building some Lambda functions, do I have to make sure the naming is different from the Lambda functions you're building, et cetera. So there's a huge number of benefits this multi-tenant model brings, mainly around reducing the blast radius for anything that goes wrong. So any individual application in the environment that is is compromised or has a bad change that occurs to it, it's not going to affect everybody else. There's a logical boundary put in place between the different applications. This also helps with AWS account limits. So as you start to grow and you get larger and larger and larger, you have certain limits in terms of what you can do within a single AWS account. Many of those limits can be increased and adjusted over time, but this allows you to operate within those initial limits without constraint. This also helps with segregating user access. If you've got different application teams working on their application, you don't necessarily want application team A to be able to see or read or change application B's code. And then this really helps with the use of platform services, as I was mentioning before, things like Lambda, things like Fargate, those areas where having multiple teams operating in the same space takes a large amount of coordination. By removing the need to coordinate between those teams and giving those teams their separate account, you've reduced a lot of overhead for that. Finally, in the life sciences space, this gives you an incredible benefit in terms of auditing. We've all seen in life sciences where either an internal auditor or external auditor comes in and they're looking at system A, and that system is shared with another system, and they're able through either doing log analysis or by following kind of a change that was made within the system, they're able to expand the scope of their audit by systems sharing each other. So having the ability to have separate accounts and create complete isolation between those, make sure that your audit files, your log files, your CloudTrail files, all of those things that are in this one account that are being audited are all belong to that account. And you never have to explain to an auditor, oh, well, that particular application is not GXP, so it didn't go through this change control process. Making sure that all of those things are separate and control are really key to your success. So what Turbot's designed to do is provide an automation platform that you run within your environment, that you run inside AWS, that actually monitors the security and configuration of your entire cloud and helps you manage those large multi-account models. So the design platform goals for Turbot were really three key things that we've talked about during this talk. The first one is that the cloud team itself, the centralized cloud center of excellence or the cloud operations team, they have visibility and control over the entire environment. So whether you have 5 AWS accounts or you have 500 AWS accounts, that central team can see across all of them. They understand what's going on. And more importantly, they can set rules about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for your environment. And those rules can be anything from what services that you can use. So if it's a GXP application, making sure that you're only using AWS services that have been approved by the organization to use with GXP applications. Also making sure that audit logging is enabled and immutable and can't be deleted within those accounts. So all of those types of things that ensure that your environment is configured in a way that makes it auditable, that makes it secure, that makes it compliant, and that you have change records across all of that. The cloud team gets that capability through implementing Turbot. The application teams, on the other hand, whether it's a software development team or whether that's a data scientist, they get self-service. They get the ability to use the native cloud tools that they fell in love with, that they want to use every day, that they wanted to go out and use those great capabilities that we heard about from AWS earlier in terms of using them directly. They can use the AWS console, they can use the CLI, they can use the API, they can even use third-party tools like Terraform or Ansible or whatever Turbot is agnostic to all of that. We allow the application teams to have direct access to those cloud services and directly configure them. And what we do is we monitor on the side what they're doing. So, what capabilities have you used, what security groups have you created, what S3 buckets have you created? We monitor all of the activity and then compare it against the rule set that the centralized cloud teams made. And then we can make a judgment. The real-time guardrail essentially then makes a judgment as to whether or not that configuration is allowed or not allowed within the environment, either creating an alert or actually fixing it in real time and repairing it in real time. Because of that, the enterprise fundamentally gets best practices put in place. So having read all of those great AWS white papers that exist about how to configure the environment in a secure and safe way, bringing in third-party expertise from organizations like NIST and PCI and CIS that have control objective schemes that can be applied to your environment to ensure best practice configuration. All of that's automated by Turbot, and ensuring that every time you deploy a new account, you're getting all of those best practices, implemented in a safe and secure way. Fundamentally, having this infrastructure in place with a really sound cloud operations team makes sure that you can really attack 6 key areas of compliance within your organization. The first one's around identity and access management. So Turbot provides a full federated identity and access management. This is making sure that your on-premise federated identity, whether that be SAML or AD, is connected to the cloud. And so all the actions that your users are taking in the cloud are audited back to those federated identities that they have. The second piece is really around data protection. These are the core controls around restricting public access to data, making sure that encryption is on all data, and making sure, especially important to life sciences, making sure that your backup and data retention are configured correctly within the environment. Automated architecture makes sure that those enterprise best practices are created out of the box. So this would be things like, ensuring that CloudTrail, audit logging is enabled, ensuring that the AMIs and the custom models for this organization are implemented. So basically building that automated architecture immediately on account creation is a huge accelerator for each and every project that deploys within the environment. Turbot also has operating system level controls. This enables OS hardening and patching, making sure that those individual instances that are deployed within the cloud are safe and secure themselves. And then on top of all that, we provide operational and cost controls that allow you to ensure that, your budgeting, you have visibility to budget and cost, that you're tagging all of your resources, and you can set limits on the type of resources that people can use within their account. And finally, network automation, the biggest piece in terms of security that you need to manage within your environment. We ensure that we can automate the creation of VPCs in a way that protects the enterprise, connects to your on-premise networks, and really follows AWS best practices in that space. All of this is only capable when you have a great partner like RCH that's using the software tooling with their own best practices and capabilities and helping you along that journey to get to that governed environment. So I'll turn it over to Michael, Dave, to talk a little bit about how RCH can help you pull all of this together.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Andrew. So what we're really touching on here, in addition to technologies, are moving everybody to a better place. So how is the cloud helping with this better place, or as it's known now, this transformation to a better place? Well, why don't we first level set that we're experiencing the same challenges. Then we'll discuss ways that we can move the needle. Finally, I'm going to share some customer examples and specifics of how we got there. So let's first talk about the landscape. Remember when our world was simpler? Remember when bio-IT was simpler? Remember when the business was left to its own devices? You had someone, for example, sitting in a lab. They had a high-end modeling workstation. They had their supercomputer at their feet. They had resources to help them, people with, sysadmin. You had Linux or Unix person before that, an application experience, and then what happened there? As Dave pointed to earlier, IT put standards in place for a lot of good reasons, drew those people in, then things got even more challenging when they decided to outsource a lot of the support models. Well, the way it used to look when it was simpler, it doesn't look that way anymore. In fact, it's getting wider, right? And this is what the business, science, and IT look like now. The question is, why does it look this way? Well, for a variety of reasons, but primarily the industry's changed. So new business models are built, and the models were driven by technologies, and new policies were put in place, and new standards. Everyone loves that term, right? Standards. So IT has standards. Well, there's a reason for that, because they work for most of the business. Most of the businesses have a well-defined set of applications, processes, and workflows. And therefore, IT can predict, they can adjust, and they can properly manage the businesses based on these standards. Well, much of the business and science don't. These groups have a great number of applications. The applications can be commercial, off the shelf, open source. Sometimes they write their own code. And their processes change all the time, as do the workflows. I'm sure you all know the example of, Dr. So-and-so in a lab somewhere finds out about her colleague at another life sciences pharma company or somewhere in academia. They have a new process or new application or new tool in place, and they want that in production tomorrow because it can immediately impact what they're doing. Well, it doesn't work that well, not with the way the IT model is set up. And then on top of that, now there's this push to go to the cloud for logical reasons, some undefined reasons. So I think we're aware of all the whys. The question is, what can we do to close the gap? How do we get there safely, securely, while keeping everybody happy? How do we embrace all these transformative technologies, close the gap, and more important, enjoy this improved collaboration between business and IT? Well, you make informed choices based on tested, proven practices, experiences with technology, people, and the best practices. Next slide, please. So take a look at this for a minute and read it. The point here is what was working in the past is not working now, especially with cloud adoption. I love this quote because it applies to not only our company, but any group or organization that needs to be agile, move fast, and scale with better results. Speed is king when it comes to results, especially in life sciences. Unfortunately, most big companies are not agile, nimble, or flexible, but they can be if they make small fundamental changes. So, how do you become fast, flexible, and effective? Well, obviously, selfishly, like Andrew and Dave are talking about, you work with people and partners that have experienced proven results in a very specific area. So I'll give you an example. If you went to your doctor, your general practitioner, and they diagnosed you and told you, well, you need to go see a specialist, you would not insist that they perform that specialized treatment. Of course you wouldn't. You go visit someone that had real hands-on practical experience in a very specific area, a specialist, an expert, right? It's like that TV commercial where they say, just okay is not okay. No, you need to see a specialist. So for what it's worth, a little background, a little context, the RCH Cloud journey began over 10 years ago. We were fortunate enough to be exposed to hands-on work with one of the early life sciences adopters of the cloud, and that would be Johnson & Johnson. It's all been well documented what they do. The point is, like Dave and Andrew, we have a lot of experience working in the cloud. So whether you're just exploring this, you're trying to create a plan, let's look at ways to optimize the journey. There are several ways to move the needle. Well, number one, we can be more efficient. The number one challenge for life sciences is data management. As we all know, there's much more data in many more formats than there was a few years ago. I'll give you an example of some exposure we had recently. We were called to a meeting of a CIO of a major pharma company after doing some highly visible and successful work with them. And after execution, we were called to this meeting, and candidly, we don't get invited to those meetings, not out of the chute. We're hands-on, we're in the trenches, we're working with the scientists, we're working with the IT people to support them. And after explaining to this gentleman what we did, he got it, he understood it, understand the value. First question he asked is, well, what's your take on analytics? Well, I thought about it, and I thought there are two ways to answer the question like that. One is to discuss at length our experience with analytics and maybe throw out some possible solutions to that. The other one was, I didn't know enough about what he was talking about. So I asked for clarity. So I choose to ask, well, tell us what you're thinking about analytics. Tell us about your data. and got a smile on his face, which was reassuring. But this is not unique. Many organizations are challenged with data. They're challenged to, number one, locate the data. And some issues have issues categorizing and organizing data. Others have limited insight into the depending amount of data they will be consuming. Where's it going to come from? Inside the organization, outside the organization? What's the impact going to be on IT to support this? So first, to become more efficient, we need to make it easier for people to get to and work with the data. We need to think more like an ecosystem approach instead of the traditional functional departments. Next, we need to improve efficiencies, right? We all know that technology costs, especially the on-prem costs, were rising with respect to our initial investment. It's now mandatory, it's dictated to us to reduce the overhead and finally improve our utilization on this investment. Well, with the cloud, we have much better visibility into those costs, which means we can predict and adjust faster what things are going to cost. Cloud is making computing simple, as Andrew said. You can run anywhere, you can isolate workloads, and you can establish consistencies across the business. Remember, as we talked about, science demands size and speed, but it also demands the ability to scale. I'm also here to share with you that some costs during the cloud adoption will actually increase over time. For those of you that experience this, you know what I'm talking about. And the reason is often you're running these parallel systems between on-premise systems and in the cloud. And you're going to experience an increase in costs until you achieve that crossover. However, with some specific businesses and workflows, you can actually decrease the adoption time and the subsequent costs very quickly. So we've seen success with companies who take a unique approach to the way they traditionally operate, especially with respect to, as we pointed out earlier, scientific computing needs. We need to think, like Dave touched on, more like an ecosystem approach instead of the traditional functional departments. If you begin to establishing a platform model, like Dave recommended with Turbot, and how it can be easily applied to many areas, it will make the process much, much simpler. The final way to improve the efficiency is to change something that's repeatable, transportable, and scalable. Example is adoption of DevOps model, not just for software development, but for other areas of the business. It's proven to be most efficient, which brings us to the second way that you can move the needle. The traditional model was we're going to build technology, then we're going to adjust a service around that. Now, services are being designed for the business, which actually makes it easier for IT to manage. Finally, people need to adapt their skills and partner up with those that can help. You need to determine whether it's internal, external support I mean by partnering, obviously, is best. An example, although we're a company, our stage is a company of technical people with a background in traditional sysadmin capabilities. Example, traditionally was hardware and application experience. With few exceptions, all of our folks now have cloud skills and or some science background. The model is changing, and people need to do what they do best. As we touched on earlier, not every process applies to all areas of the business, especially in the areas of R&D. We need to identify which ones are necessary and which ones are not. The only asset more important than your data is the people in your company. We need to make it as easy as possible for them to do the job they're skilled for. So you need to ask, do you develop this internal talent? Do you go outside the organization? Well, whichever you choose, the decision has to first be made to allow people what they do best. Let the scientists do research, the IT people do IT. It rarely works, and I'm sure you're experienced with this, it rarely works when there's redundancy, especially on the business side. So as Andrew alluded to and Dave pointed out directly, the first recommendation we make is to have a dedicated cloud team. It sounds simple, don't always see it in practice, but this is not a part-time job. You have to have a dedicated cloud team. So if you don't have one or can't invest in one for internal resources to do full-time, or you just need to append the experience that you have, you utilize partners like AWS, Turbot, and RCH to append that. Again, back to letting people do back to letting people do what they do best. There are amazing new technologies now available, especially in the cloud. So we need to be flexible, and we need to be able to empower our users. Between them, AWS and partners like Turbot and AWS and Turbot have great analytics, compute tools, development tools, artificial intelligence tools, storage, and of course, security, compliance, control products. They aren't just shiny new objects to play with, but they're real functional products that are consistently refined and updated, and they can be used now without having to wait to be engineered for a specific environment. The bottom line is, because of access to the products and proven use cases, they can have immediate impact on your work. And let's talk about a specific customer where there was immediate work. Now, as Dave mentioned, Takeda had embraced AWS and Turbot to begin with in their R&D areas. And following implementation of AWS and Turbot, the customer was in need of some help to execute on the cloud strategy. Specifically, they needed to help maximize business continuity while demonstrating value beyond just the day-to-day operational work. So the questions were several. How do they improve collaboration? How do they improve operational efficiencies? And how do they supplement these IT teams with experienced professionals in a specific area? How do they keep the daily operations running and support innovation at the same time? This was the challenge. They then came to the solution. Well, the solution was, we just started off the way you should. First, you gain insight from all the stakeholders, IT, the business management, and even some of the existing vendors. Next was to do just as AWS and Turbot did by delivering on a foundation, this all-important platform from which you can build and demonstrate incremental success. And the next thing we did, we decided upon projects that were not only visible, but had the highest chance of success. What did we do? We designed and implemented an IT platform. It served as a small molecule registration system, and it also included a related data warehouse. Next, we performed a database migration, including design, development, and testing of integrated services in AWS for these disparate databases, which were MySQL, Postgres, and Oracle. And what this did was it allowed us to append to support an operations model of the Turbot platform. Finally, after demonstrating success, R/Sage was fortunate to become the go-to partner for not only the operations work, but engineering, implementing, and then supporting computing at scale, such as HPC, big data, and analytics projects. The results. Well, the results were IT and business determined it a success. Well, why was it a success? It was a win-win. Everybody was happy. Business uses the platform and it continues to evolve. Think about that. How often in our IT experience have projects going on where the business continues to use the platform that's supported by IT? So not only continue to use the platform and continues to evolve, IT found this to be simpler, a much more elegant platform to support than a traditional on-prem solution. And the process to replicate has become much easier. So together, we achieved the goal of total transformation. And the results were what we all wanted. We want a faster, better, scalable, supported, and truly innovative for both IT and the business. All right, so what's our secret sauce? What's our secret process? A lot of it's not really secret. I'm going to share with what you do. First, number one is around discovery. Objective recommendations. So think about that. We're proud of the fact that we can provide objective recommendations because, with the exception of few technologies, we're vendor agnostic. So our customers find it's best that they can select a better tool to fit the problem rather than the other way around. Second, we align. Hey, we all have different needs, but if we take the time to gather stakeholders, determine needs, and align on goals, we're going to have a much better chance of success. Third, we built for present and future successes of the company. This wasn't a one-off project. In addition to scalable technologies, you need scalable partners that grow with you. And then finally, once you've achieved success, once you optimize, you continue to refine. Wash, rinse, repeat. This may not seem unique to some of you, but the difference is about the process is more about the people in the company. Again, I can't emphasize enough the need for experienced group in a specific area of life sciences. Remember, they're generalists and they're specialists, regardless of the size of the company. So we are going to wrap up with some critical takeaways. Number one is to help you realize the big company individual goals of lower total cost, flexibility, security, better management, cost controls. To get to that total transformation, you need to adopt a new operating model. And that new operating model is what we talked about in the cloud. As Dave shared, you need to implement the proper platform for controls and predictability that will ensure better management and best practices. And then finally, again, it's like building a house, right? You need a commitment from the stakeholders, the owners, and then you can put in this proper foundation. Once you have this in place, the proper model, the right guardrails, then the entire work culture can adjust and easily become much more predictable. And finally, if you remember Psychology 101, the key to achieving something big or get someone or a team to do something really big is to start small, get an early success. Well, in our world, you can begin by determining which applications or which workflows can be most easily bettered in the cloud. It just so happens that a lot of the life sciences and early discovery and development workflows fit that model. So which applications, which workflows will have the least impact on operations and the greatest impact on the business? It's not just about moving from multiple on-prem silos of data and systems. It's about making the business more effective. And your ability to adopt cloud best practices allow you to get more from your data and make people more productive. And finally, you can soon realize the potential of all these cloud solutions and the reality of a completely, fully integrated collaborative environment. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of Andrew and Dave today. If you have any questions, you can contact us at the information below. Thank you all.